Our third panelist is Io Sanderson Wilson. Io is the founder, CEO, and president of Empower the Village, Inc., a data-driven 501c3 nonprofit organization focused on restoring prosperity, peace, and power to the Black community. She most recently served as EVP and Chief Operating Officer for Cornerstone Family Programs. Before entering the nonprofit world, Io served as Vice President of the Comcast NBC Universal Foundation, and also as the Comcast NBC Universal Community Impact Team Senior Executive, leading the Strategic Operations and Giving Department. In parallel with her professional career, Io currently serves on the board of the Community Foundation of New Jersey, where she chairs the Scholarship Committee and is a member of the Executive Leadership Council, Better World Leadership Council, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, the African American Chamber of Commerce of New Jersey, and on the Women Business Collaborative Advisory Council. Io earned her JD from Columbia University School of Law and BA in Social and Behavioral Sciences from the Johns Hopkins University.
Thank you, Philanda. And I want to also thank the MLK Observance Committee for including me and Empower the Village to participate. So thank you very much for that. I'm inspired always. Ms. Shirley knows this. I've known her for quite a while now. I'm a Queens girl too, so our families cross paths. But I'm inspired by her story, and I'm emboldened by our history. So I want to just share a couple of things. The narrative, this whole platform that we have tonight is about reframing the narrative. And why is that important? Let's first talk about that. Whoever controls the narrative of your life controls the outcome, right? So let's think about, unpack what that is. If the narrative is that you are lazy, that you aren't smart, that you are unable to succeed despite all the support that you get, and you believe that, you internalize that, right? That's the only narrative that you hear, then that creates some belief systems in you. You start to believe that you are lazy, that you cannot do better no matter what support or empowerment you may get. And then that controls your behavior. When you don't believe that you can do something, you behave as if you will never be able to accomplish anything. You will never be able to succeed. And then the outcome is an expected outcome, which is that you will have a life that is sad and impoverished, et cetera. So controlling the narrative is critically important. And the thing that was said earlier about the, being freed and the plantation system, what we need to understand today is that we are still within the plantation system. It's just a different plantation. And what I mean by that is that our ancestors didn't have much, but they were able to overcome that system that we're talking about. They made a way out of no way. You hear our folks talk about, they made a way out of no way. Well, they had much less resources, less power, less education, but they found a way to make a way. We have so much more, but I think what's happening is that there's a narrative that has been set, that we've been internalizing, that is taking away our power and our ability to move forward. So the whole PTSS, that post-traumatic slave syndrome, is about that narrative that comes out of the trauma that's been passed down from generation to generation to just survive. Some things that we had to do, even the way we discipline our children, was because of what we observed to keep them safe, right? Some of those things that were literally beaten into our heads historically have controlled our minds. So even though the physical enslavement on the physical plantation may be different and may not be there, there's a mental enslavement that has been ongoing. Understanding the narrative means that you understand that the cards were stacked against you. It wasn't just a matter of you were freed, how come you haven't done better for yourselves? There were systematic policies, even the ones that claim to be to help us, that were suppressing our ability to move forward. But we are a resilient people. We found our way around, through, under, we figured it out. And there's a whole debate going on now about segregation versus integration. So when we were in these segregated communities, you got to see the doctor, the lawyer, the engineer, the street sweeper, everyone lived together. We supported each other. The shop owners looked like you. You know, I love the scene from Do the Right Thing when we're looking at Mookie and he's in the pizza shop and he works for the pizza parlor. And then you go there, at some stage, they go to the Chinese owned shop. There's all these other ethnicities that own businesses within our mostly Black communities. And all the grievance about, you know, the fact that they're there. Well, it used to be before integration and moving around and all the things that we did, that we were the ones, we were the shop owners, we were the example. We built our own economy. So the bottom line for me in terms of empowering the village is understanding the interconnections of history and how we got here and what the success stories are and how do we go back? How do we rewind that clock and say, okay, we may be able to live in a very integrated society, but what were the benefits of really pulling together? If you look at other groups, they do it very successfully. If you look at the data around who owns businesses and how well those businesses are doing, the data shows that later immigrants, the Latinx community, the Asian community, they are outperforming us in so many ways. And part of it is because they spend their dollars with their own first, right? If you look at the data, our dollars circulate no more than 6 hours in our own community after we make a dollar. In other communities, whether it's a white community or a Jewish community or an Asian community, it's 17 to 30 days. They circulate the dollars within their communities before they even start sharing money elsewhere. So back to what I was saying about the plantation system. We are still working for others, right? And we take that money and we give it right back to them. So it may not be directly to the slave master on the plantation where we live, but it's some other, not our own. So one of the lessons that I think beyond the resilience is this idea of supporting your own. There was a mention earlier, I think it was you, Henry, about the Rooney Rule and affirmative action and reframing the narrative. We need to reframe that narrative too. Affirmative action is not about, in my opinion, about Black folks and brown folks getting a special advantage. It's really about taking away, stripping away the advantage that white men have historically had. That is the affirmative action, right? They have had the privilege and the advantage all along. To me, reframing that narrative is like, okay, how do we make things more fair because this certain group has had an advantage? And so, you know, in recent history, if you look at the numbers, and I'll harken back to my corporate life with DE&I, lots of discussion about what are we going to do to make sure that there's less discrimination and more opportunity within corporate America. And the truth of the matter is, you know, the laws are there on the books, but the funding to support the EEOC is abysmal. There's almost no funding in the states that have the highest populations of Black people. So you can put a lot of things on the books to pacify groups, but in practice, they really mean very little. And to take it a step further from a policy standpoint, and then I'll get off my soapbox, Belinda, take it a step further, think about those laws that are supposed to block discrimination. They only apply to employers of a certain size. Most of us actually don't work for big corporations. There are the highest two employers for Black Americans are first the government. So the vast majority of us either work for government, and the second highest employer for Black people are Black-owned businesses. So think about that. If we don't support our own businesses, we are not supporting the employment of our people and the Black economy. So we've got to stop thinking that the white man's ice is a little bit colder than our ice. Their water's a little more wet. And think about what are we doing when we support a Black-owned business, as an example. You are supporting a family, you are supporting a community, you are building an economy, just like the other folks are doing. So I think that reframing the narrative is first understanding the history, understanding what the obstacles were, thinking about what was the mindset, the growth mindset of the generation that Ms. Holcomb comes from, and how do we get that mindset back, that growth mindset, so that we can propel ourselves forward.